It was 6 a.m., the start of another relentless day. I stretched, feeling the familiar ache in my shoulders, a constant reminder of the never-ending cycle of chores. Slipping out of bed, I tiptoed past the slumbering form of my husband Francisco. The kitchen beckoned, the aroma of burnt toast already wafting through the air. My sister-in-law, Elena, stood by the stove, her face twisted in frustration. "Good morning," I mumbled, grabbing a mug and pouring myself some coffee. Elena gave a curt nod, her silence speaking volumes. I knew what was coming. The piles of unwashed dishes, the overflowing laundry basket, the dust bunnies gathering in the corners, all silent accusations waiting to be voiced. "Morning, honey," Francisco mumbled, joining us at the table. He ruffled his hair and stole a glance at the mess around him. "Looks like a busy day ahead." I forced a smile, the tension tightening in my gut. "You could say that." Elena cleared her throat, her voice laced with passive aggressiveness. "Maybe if someone helped out around here, things wouldn't be so chaotic." I swallowed the retort that burned on my tongue. It was a daily battle, this unspoken war over who deserved to be called homemaker. Francisco, oblivious to the undercurrent, simply shrugged and took a bite of his toast. "Don't worry, Elena," he said, his mouth full. "She'll handle it." The words felt like a punch to the gut. As I washed the dishes, the sting of tears welled up in my eyes. It wasn't just the chores. It was the constant judgment, the lack of support, the feeling of being invisible. Today, however, something felt different. A spark of defiance ignited within me, a whisper of change threatening to erupt. But for now, I took a deep breath, the weight of the day settling on my shoulders like a heavy mantle. The battle lines were drawn, and the fight for my sanity, it seemed, had just begun. The news hit me like a rogue wave, pulling me under the weight of disbelief and despair. Elena, my seemingly stoic sister-in-law, was getting a divorce. The announcement, delivered over a tearful phone call, shattered the fragile sense of normalcy I'd clung to. "I just can't do it anymore," she choked out, her voice thick with emotion. "The constant fighting, the feeling of being unheard, it's taking its toll." My heart ached for her, but a selfish part of me couldn't help but worry about the ripple effect this would have on my already strained life. Elena, despite our differences, had been a source of support, a silent ally in the unspoken war I waged within the walls of my own home. Her arrival later that day confirmed my fears. With tear-stained cheeks and overflowing suitcases, she moved into the spare room, her presence casting a long shadow over the already tense atmosphere. Francisco, ever oblivious, seemed unfazed by the sudden change. "Just another mouth to feed," he muttered, barely looking up from his phone. My frustration bubbled over. "It's not just another mouth to feed, Francisco," I snapped. "This is a major life change for Elena, and she needs our support." He finally tore his gaze away from the screen, his brow furrowed in annoyance. "She's an adult, Michelle. She can handle it." His dismissive tone sent a fresh wave of anger surging through me. It was always the same. The expectation that I would shoulder the burden, solve everyone's problems, and maintain a semblance of normalcy while simultaneously juggling my own responsibilities. That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of Elena's presence and the additional chores that came with it pressed down on me. The resentment towards Francisco, his lack of understanding, and the constant criticism from his family gnawed at me. Sleep, when it finally came, offered no solace, only a restless anticipation of the challenges that awaited me in the coming days. Exhaustion gnawed at me as I surveyed the battlefield. The kitchen, once again, a testament to the relentless war against domestic chaos. Dishes piled high, laundry overflowing, and dust bunnies multiplying in the corners. It was a scene all too familiar, a constant reminder of the invisible burden I carried. Taking a deep breath, I decided to confront the issue head-on. Francisco was sprawled on the couch, engrossed in a sports game, oblivious to the domestic turmoil around him. "Honey," I started, my voice carefully measured, "I need to talk to you about something." He glanced up, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face, before returning his attention to the TV. "Can it wait? The game's about to get good." My patience, already threadbare, began to fray. "No, It can't wait. This is important. He finally sighed, setting down the remote. All right, shoot. It's about the house, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I can't keep doing everything on my own. It's simply too much. He scoffed. Come on, Michelle. You know I help out when I can. When you can? I repeated, my voice rising. That's the problem, isn't it? It's always when you can, not when we need to. He frowned, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. I work long hours. You know that. And I do too, I retorted, frustration boiling over. But somehow, managing a career and keeping this house afloat seems to fall solely on my shoulders. Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. Francisco stared at me, his expression unreadable. I felt a flicker of hope, a desperate plea for him to finally understand. Maybe we could hire someone to help, he finally suggested, his voice hesitant. The suggestion, while seemingly well-intentioned, felt like a slap in the face. Hire someone? As if this is just some inconvenience, something money can fix. The fight simmered, unspoken accusations hanging heavy in the air. We both retreated to our corners, the chasm between us widening with each passing moment. As I stared at the mountain of chores, a seed of doubt began to sprout within me. Was this how it was always going to be? Was this the future I had signed up for? The weight of the question settled on my chest, heavier than any pile of laundry or stack of dirty dishes. Frustration gnawed at me like a persistent ache. The conversation with Francisco had left me feeling unheard, his dismissive attitude fueling a simmering resentment. As I surveyed the never-ending list of chores, a spark of rebellion ignited within me. I wouldn't be a martyr anymore. Instead of resignation, a new resolve filled me. I marched out of the house, determined to find a solution. Hours later I returned, a triumphant glint in my eyes. In the living room, Francisco looked up from his phone, eyebrows raised in surprise. "What's that?" he asked, gesturing to the sleek robotic vacuum cleaner humming in the corner. "Meet my new assistant," I announced, a hint of defiance in my voice. "It cleans floors automatically." He stared at the device, a mixture of confusion and skepticism clouding his features. "But why? We already have a vacuum cleaner." "Because," I said, my voice firm, "I'm tired of doing everything myself. This is just the beginning." Over the next few days, my home transformed into a haven of automated appliances. A smart speaker chimed reminders, a self-cleaning oven gleamed in the kitchen, and a robot mop glided tirelessly across the floor. Francisco watched these changes unfold with a mix of amusement and apprehension. "This is getting a little out of hand, don't you think?" he finally commented one evening, watching the robotic vacuum navigate around his feet. "Maybe," I conceded, a sly smile playing on my lips, "but at least now I have some help." His silence spoke volumes. The unspoken challenge hung in the air. A test of wills, a battle for control over the domestic landscape. But this time, I felt empowered. The robots might have been whirring and beeping, but it was I who had taken control, reclaiming my time and sanity, one automated appliance at a time. The future, though uncertain, no longer felt like an endless cycle of drudgery. A glimmer of hope flickered within me, a promise of a life where chores wouldn't overshadow happiness and responsibility wouldn't be synonymous with resentment. The tension crackled in the air like static electricity. My in-laws, summoned by Francisco, sat stiffly on the couch, their expressions thunderous. The robotic vacuum cleaner whirred industriously in the background, a silent yet potent symbol of my rebellion. "This is ridiculous, Michelle," my mother-in-law declared, her voice laced with disapproval. "Filling the house with these contraptions instead of simply taking care of your responsibilities." I held her gaze, my voice calm but firm. "These contraptions, as you call them, are helping me manage my workload. It's called progress." "Progress?" My father-in-law scoffed. "This is not progress. This is laziness. A wife's duty is to take care of her home." His archaic words felt like a punch to the gut. "My duty is not to be a servant," I retorted, my voice rising. "I have a career, a life outside these walls, and I shouldn't have to choose between that and maintaining an immaculate home single-handedly." Francisco, sandwiched between his family and me, remained silent, his gaze flickering between us like a nervous spectator. The air grew thick with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. "This is not how things are done in our family," my mother-in-law insisted, her voice trembling with indignation. "A wife respects her husband and fulfills her wifely duties." "And what about my needs?" I challenged, tears welling up in my eyes. "Does anyone care about those?" The room fell silent, the weight of my question hanging heavy in the air. Francisco finally spoke, his voice low and hesitant. "Maybe there's a compromise we can reach." But his words, meant to appease, rang hollow. The lines have been drawn, the battle lines of tradition versus progress, expectation versus equality. As I stared at my in-laws, their faces etched with disapproval, a chilling realization dawned on me. This wasn't just about chores anymore. It was about control, about a fundamental clash of values. And in that moment, I knew that compromise wouldn't be enough. The path forward, however uncertain, lay in breaking free from the shackles of their expectations, even if it meant breaking away entirely. The silence in the house was deafening. The robotic vacuum cleaner, once a symbol of rebellion, now sat dormant in the corner, a silent testament to the shattered peace. The confrontation with my in-laws had left me emotionally drained, the weight of their disapproval a heavy burden on my shoulders. Francisco sat across from me at the kitchen table, his face etched with a mixture of confusion and concern. We hadn't spoken since the argument, the air thick with unspoken words and unresolved tension. "I don't understand why you had to be so confrontational," he finally sighed, breaking the silence. "Because I'm tired of being unheard, of having my needs dismissed," I retorted, my voice tight with emotion. "This isn't just about chores, Francisco. It's about respect, about partnership." He ran a hand through his hair, his gaze avoiding mine. "I know things haven't been easy lately, but..." "But what?" I interrupted, tears welling up in my eyes. "But you expect me to shoulder everything, to be the maid, the cook, the therapist, while you simply go about your life." He flinched at my words, the truth hitting him like a physical blow. The silence stretched on, filled with the weight of unspoken hurt and disillusionment. "Maybe we need to take a break," I finally whispered, the words tasting like ashes in my mouth. Francisco's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing his face. "A break? What do you mean?" I said, taking a deep breath, "that I can't live like this anymore. I need to figure out what I want, what kind of life I deserve." His silence spoke volumes. The unspoken question hung in the air, a question neither of us dared to voice. But the answer, though terrifying, was clear. This wasn't just a break. It was a turning point, a crossroads where the path forward remained shrouded in uncertainty. As I stared at Francisco, the man I once loved, a chilling realization dawned on me. The life I had envisioned, the partnership I had craved, might not be possible within the confines of this relationship. And for the first time, I was no longer afraid to walk away, to choose myself, even if it meant facing the unknown alone. The air hung heavy with the finality of packing boxes. Each item I placed inside felt like a piece of myself being sealed away, a memory tucked into storage for an uncertain future. Francisco sat on the couch, his face a mask of conflicting emotions, sadness, anger, perhaps even a flicker of regret. "Are you sure about this?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I met his gaze, the familiar sting of tears threatening to spill. "Yes," I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my heart. "I can't stay here any longer. This isn't the life I want, not the partnership I deserve." He stood up, his movements hesitant, and approached me. His hand reached out, hovering in the air for a moment before gently touching my cheek. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver down my spine, a bittersweet reminder of what we were losing. "I still love you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I know," I replied, my voice choked with unshed tears. "But love isn't enough. We need respect, understanding, and a shared vision for the future. And right now, we don't have that." He pulled his hand away, his shoulders slumping in defeat. The silence stretched on, heavy with unspoken words, and the weight of a love that couldn't bridge the chasm between our desires. As I carried the final box out the door, I took one last look at the house that had once been a symbol of our dreams, now a stark reminder of their shattered fragments. The future stretched before me, an uncharted territory filled with uncertainty and fear, but also with the exhilarating promise of a new beginning. The slam of the car door echoed in the quiet street, a punctuation mark at the end of a chapter. I drove away, the weight of the past receding in the rearview mirror. The road ahead was long and winding, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. I was free from the expectations, the judgment, and the suffocating weight of a life that didn't fit. Free to write my own story, a story of self-discovery, resilience, and the pursuit of a future where love and respect walked hand in hand. A year had passed since Michelle left her marriage and embarked on her journey of self-discovery. The initial turbulence had settled, replaced by a newfound sense of peace and stability. Her career flourished, her apartment felt like home, and the supportive network of friends she built provided a constant source of strength. One sunny afternoon, Michelle decided to revisit the park where she used to spend countless hours with Francisco. As she strolled down the familiar path, memories flooded back: picnics under the shade of the old oak tree, stolen kisses on the park bench, dreams whispered beneath the starlit sky. A bittersweet pang of nostalgia tugged at her heart. Suddenly, a familiar voice broke the reverie. "Michelle?" She turned to see Francisco standing there, his face etched with a mix of surprise and hesitation. He held a red, leather-bound book in his hand, the same one they used to read poems to each other during their courtship. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over her: surprise, curiosity, a flicker of lingering affection. After a moment of awkward silence, she finally managed a small smile. "Francisco, what a surprise." He cleared his throat, his gaze shifting nervously. I was walking in the park and saw you. Couldn't help but say hello." They stood there for a moment, an invisible tension hanging in the air. Michelle noticed a change in him, a hint of weariness in his eyes, a subtle shift in his demeanor. "How are you?" she finally asked, her voice gentle. He sighed. "Things haven't been easy. The house feels empty without you. My parents, well, let's just say they haven't exactly been supportive." He held up the book. "Remember this? I found it while cleaning out the attic. It brought back a lot of memories." Michelle felt a lump form in her throat. Memories of shared dreams, passionate arguments, and ultimately, a love that couldn't withstand the weight of unspoken expectations. "I'm doing well," she replied, forcing a smile. "Work is good. I have a great group of friends, and I'm finally feeling settled." He nodded, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I'm happy for you, Michelle. Truly. I just wanted to see you, apologize for everything. I realize now how much I took you for granted, how blind I was to your needs." His words, though belated, resonated with a sense of closure. Michelle appreciated his honesty, the acknowledgement of his shortcomings. "It's okay, Francisco," she said, her voice soft. "We both made mistakes. What matters now is that we've both grown from this experience." They stood in silence for a while longer, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, Michelle knew it was time to say goodbye. "I should get going," she said gently. Francisco nodded, understanding etched on his face. "It was good seeing you, Michelle." "You too," she replied, offering a final smile. As she walked away, Michelle felt a sense of peace settle over her. The encounter with Francisco, though unexpected, had brought a sense of closure. She had forgiven him, not for him, but for herself. The past, with its joys and sorrows, would remain a part of her story, but it wouldn't define her future. Looking ahead, Michelle saw a path filled with possibilities. She was no longer defined by her relationship with Francisco. She was her own woman, strong, independent, and ready to embrace whatever life threw her way. The future, once uncertain, now shimmered with the promise of new beginnings, exciting adventures, and a love that would respect her individuality and empower her to soar.